Welcome to this Heather Wright live and kicking broadcast. Today we're going to be discussing the power of influence, influencing skills. Helen Keller said, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. This from a woman who was born deaf and blind at a time when deaf blind people were put in institutions. If she can see life as an adventure and really sees it with both hands, then, the rest of us should be able to do so too. But if we're going to have life as an adventure, influencing skills is something we're going to need. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. An adventure? I'm not a big superhero. I'm not some kind of sports person who goes out there and gets gold medals and achieves all of these kind of things. But life can be an adventure for all of us. It's really about feel-good factor. We don't have to be up there on the TV, being seen as a high achiever. It's about what makes us feel good. So I'll give you a couple of little ideas. So this is me. I've got 4 black belts in different martial arts, and I'm certainly no kind of kung fu David Carradine character. I just started the martial arts because a friend of mine went along and I went along with her. There was a lot less TV when I was a kid, and then I happened to join another one when I was older, when my son wanted to start. It's just the way it is, But it's great to be able to say that's what I've done. That adventure of learning something new. Or what about running a marathon? The only reason I ran the New York Marathon was because somebody said to me one night when I'd had a few drinks, I'd like you to support me. I need to raise money for a charity. And I went, do you know what? I will do that with you. And before I knew it, there I was booked in to do the New York Marathon. It was a heck of an adventure for that weekend. And I didn't do it in any great time. Oh, blooming hell, they were nearly sweeping up after me. I might as well have collected the bunting as I was running. I use the term loosely, of course. Or how about this? This is something anybody can do. I realize there are people out there listening to this going, bungee jumping? You are joking. It's not for me. That's okay. Adventures aren't just about the adrenaline junkie kind of stuff, but anyone can jump off a bridge, although I would always recommend you're attached by a rope to the bridge when you do it. Well, Land's End to John O'Groats. This was a great adventure for just over a week or so. But the only reason I did it was because I wanted to teach my 13-year-old son that sometimes you do stuff just for the sake of when you get to the end, saying you've done it, the achievement. Because, by the way, for those of you, and there'll be some of you listening who have done the Land's End to John O'Groats, when you get to the end, all there is some bloke trying to take your photograph and flog it to you. It's not like somebody's there with a medal, but it was still a great adventure. You can still proudly put your hand on your heart and go, yeah, hey, I did this. In fact, last year I was trying to find something I wanted to do. I decided, what am I going to do this time? And I was over in France. And I thought, I know. And when I'm in France, I always think in a French accent. I said, I know what I am going to do this time. I am going to swim the Channel. This is what I will do. I am going to swim the Channel. I will have a photo. Everybody will impress. So here is a picture of me swimming the Channel. Yeah, well, all right then. I didn't quite get my toe in the water, but I did see the Chanel shop, and I nearly went in and bought something. Hey, life's an adventure. See, these are all things you choose, aren't they? Whether you're going to run a marathon or something. But sometimes life thrusts an adventure on you. Sometimes it's not something you choose. And in my early 20s, I went to Benidorm, my first time on holiday abroad. I know you are thinking, what a classy woman. There she is. She's going on holiday to Benidorm. Well, it was what we chose, me and my mate, I didn't know any better, but off we went to Benidorm, and I was very excited. This was an adventure. At some point during that holiday, we went to nightclubs. I know it will surprise you, but that's what you do. You go to a nightclub, and I can't remember why, but we got separated. She stayed in the nightclub. I left the nightclub and wandered off back to my hotel. On the way back to my hotel, I stopped for fish and chips. In fact, to be honest, I say Benidorm, it might as well have been somewhere in Britain, really. Stopped for fish and chips, but it was warm and it was very pleasant. When I stopped for fish and chips, I got chatting to a guy. I was about to call him a gentleman and then changed my mind in my head. I started chatting to a guy, thought he was very friendly, continued to walk with this chap when he pulled a gun on me. And this is not an adventure you choose. I thought I was going to die. Now, at any point in your life when this sort of adventure happens to you, this is when you truly, truly need your influencing skills. Could I catch a bullet between my teeth? No. Even with my 4 black belts, which I didn't actually have at that point, even with my 4 black belts, I can't catch a bullet between my teeth. So what can you do in that situation? Well, I started to talk. I started to influence. I started to persuade. The upshot of this story, the end of this story, was him calling for a cab or taxi, putting me in the taxi and paying for it back to my hotel. Now, that is probably the most important speech of my life. It's important to have your influencing skills, your ability to persuade, your ability to make friends, whatever the adventure, whether it's one you choose or one that life thrusts upon you. The challenge is that actually most people have not got a clue when it comes to influencing skills. They think that conversations are just you yabbering on at somebody else, you know. No, people haven't got a clue. They think it's about wrestling people to the ground with their ideas, pummeling them with the facts, convincing them that if one person is right, the other person will give in to it. You and I both know that there have been times when you know you've been right, but you've still not been able to persuade someone because people can be stubborn. So let's use that word clue and let's use it as an acronym. These are the 4 keys to our ability to influence, our ability to connect, our ability to listen, our ability to understand, and then our ability to empower. And it's only a very, very short broadcast today, so we'll just take those a little bit at a time. We could do a lot on it, but we're only going to do a little bit at a time. So let's talk about connection. Remember, people love people. From the very, very early years, we love to be liked. We love to be hugged, whether that be real, physically, or metaphorically. I'm going to suggest, just by way of a little inkling here, that I'm not saying you go into work tomorrow and start hugging everybody, much as that might be friendly. HR might get a bit cheesed off. We've got to be careful. I'm talking metaphorically. People like to be liked. There's something innate within us. You know the people you hang around with are the people who you believe respect you and respect your ideas. So the first thing we have to do if we're going to connect with people is we need to start seeing people for what they potentially could be and not necessarily for what they are. It's Michelangelo quote, I saw the angel in the marble and cut away to set him free. Now, although Michelangelo was actually specifically referring to marble that he was going to cut away to set free, like an artist, when we see some people who seem to be just stubborn blocks of marble, we need to be able to see beyond that. We need to get the wonder of what people could potentially be, to see the puzzle, to enjoy looking into somebody's mind and finding out about them instead of feeling that need to tell them about us. So here's another little tip. Gandhi used to say, don't walk through my mind with your dirty feet. If we're going to truly connect with people, we need to be aware of trampling on people's ideas, trampling on their feelings and emotions, and maybe just trampling on their ideas and dreams. Even just simply, and I'll bet you have had this experience too. About a year ago, my husband was diagnosed as needing a triple heart bypass. Now, this is a guy who's really healthy. Yes, he cycled Land's End to John O'Groats with me when we did that cycle. And then one day we found out his genetics said everything was all clogged up inside, and actually he should have died in his 40s because of the state it was all in. How many people do you think told us about the horrendous things that they'd been through when they had some, or a friend of theirs had some issue with their heart? At a time when we're feeling vulnerable and a bit scared, how many people do you think told us? Loads of them. But then there were others. There were the ones who didn't tell us their story, who actually were more interested in how we were and how we were coping and checking that we were all right. The people who learned to connect with us rather than feel, here's an opportunity to tell you about my story. Carnegie put it really well. In 2019, I was going to say 2036. In 1936, Dale Carnegie wrote a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is not a recent book, but he said this in the first chapter. Don't do the 3 C's, criticize, condemn, or complain. I challenge you. Try it even for a week. Never criticizing, never condemning, never complaining. It's actually really hard. We all do it so much. We do it a lot. But it's a really good exercise to do. So we don't put that toxicness into the air of moaning and complaining. I challenge you to give that a go. And that will give us the platform with which to connect with people. Next thing, of course, we said was listening, learning to listen. I wonder if I ask you to score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how good you are at listening. I often ask people when I'm running courses, how good are you at listening? Score yourself on a level of 1 to 10. When people give themselves quite a high score, say, an 7 or an 8, I say, what's that about? They say, well, I think I'm a good listener, except if the other person's a bit boring. Well, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily a good listener. It means the other person is a good talker. You need to be able to listen, even if you consider them to be a bit boring. That's good listening. How about this? Margaret Carnegie, Andrew Carnegie's daughter, said this: most conversations are merely a monologue delivered in the presence of a witness. Oh, how many people do you know who just talk about themselves all the time? Yada, 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 instead of learning to listen. So 2 ears, 1 mouth, shutting up, hearing people, making sure you're actually listening. There's I think it's the Swahili for hello means I see you. I see you. Now, I realize that doesn't sound like listening because it's the eyes, but what they're saying is you are important. I see you. If you listen to somebody, they will feel that they have been seen. They will feel that they are important enough for you to listen. And that will help with our connection and help with our influencing skills. Next one is understand. Unless you listen, you can't understand people, understand where they're coming from. So learn to ask questions. Learn to ask why, where, what, how. Learn not to jump to conclusions. Learn to become curious about what drives people. Only then can you get the foundation for when you need to actually maybe input some thought process in there. So learn to listen first. Hold your horses a little bit, learn to listen and learning to understand. I was in the sauna only this morning and I was chatting to a guy. A guy asked me what I did for a living because it was after 9 o'clock and he thought I might have retired. Very nice. I was just working from home and therefore I can adjust my hours. We started talking about, he was talking about rugby and performance psychology, and we were having a chat. He was telling me about his life coaching youngsters. And a guy walked into the sauna and after only 30 seconds of listening to our conversation said, I've got a story about rugby. Let me tell you my story about rugby. And launched into this story about, I don't know, he owned a shop and some rugby player had come in and tried to steal a pair of jeans. Had nothing to do with what we were talking about, but he was more interested in what he could tell us than what he was hearing from us or understanding exactly what we were talking about. Understand people's needs. Find the key to their needs. Find the key to the way they feel. It's really important. So listen and learn to understand. And having done that, learn to empower people. Learn to make people feel good and make better choices. Be careful of your language, the wording we use. Some of our language can be very negative. So learn to use more empowering language. Talking to people about what they could possibly become rather than what they've done wrong. You can actually couch almost exactly the same thing, but just in a different language. When I was 16 years old, I read a book by a guy called Tim Stafford, which was That's Not What I Meant, I think it was called. And in the first chapter, he said this: ask yourself 3 questions before you open your mouth. Is it the truth? Is it kind? Is it helpful? Do you know what? If I read that, I don't think I spoke for about 6 months. I might be exaggerating, but I remember thinking, well, I know it's the truth, but was it kind? I need to change it. Well, I was 16 after all. And then the idea that actually when I spoke, it ought to be helpful. See, when we're at school, the reason we speak is usually to prove how much we know. And some people never quite get out of that habit. Is it kind? Is it the truth? Is it helpful? Ask those 3 questions. If you get 3 yeses, go ahead and speak. If not, change what you're going to say to make sure it's both the truth and kind and helpful. Nita Roddick put it nicely. The end result of kindness is that it draws people to you. And if it's drawing people to you, you're going to have greater influence over them. You're going to be able to persuade people. You're going to be able to talk to people. You're going to be able to just, connect much better. So for me, it's about focusing a little bit on what benefits them. I refer to this as the baby panda unicorn rainbow, yay, kind of way. When we're focusing on solutions instead of problems, when we're telling people what they could be instead of what they have been that was wrong. So focusing people on what they could be, making them feel great. One of my favorite quotes is one that you'll probably be familiar with. Maya Angelou said this: I've learned that people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Remember, that is one of the major keys to influence. Remember, we must connect, we must listen, we must understand, and then we must empower. I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast. It's been a very short walk through these 4 concepts, but I hope it's helped you. If you have any questions, do feel free to get in touch. I'm Heather Wright, and this has been Heather Wright Live and Kicking.